Philip Johnson had a dead-end job and a 5-year plan to retire rich. One day, he hit the road with 20 million stolen dollars and vanished. In March of 1997, 33-year-old Philip Johnson worked as a courier guard for Loomis Fargo Armored Cars in Jacksonville, Florida. At every stop on their route, Johnson left the safety of the steel-plated truck. He checked for any suspicious activity. Then, Johnson entered the stores where merchants would fill bags with cash, checks, and coins. The tens and thousands of dollars Johnson collected made him a tempting target to any gunman. The guard remained completely vulnerable until he could make it back to the armored car. Meanwhile, the driver stayed in the truck cab behind the bulletproof glass with his doors locked. If anyone attacked, under no circumstances could the driver let Johnson back inside the truck. He would be stuck outside on his own. If clear, the driver would open the door. It was hazardous work without hazard pay. $7 an hour without health insurance, dental plan, pension, or overtime. But the dangerous job did have a benefit that Loomis Fargo never planned on giving. By the evening of March 29, 1997, the day before Easter, a plan 5 years in the making was about to be hatched.
Phil Johnson was motivated to pull the crime off by an extreme hatred for his employer, Loomis Fargo. He felt that he was underpaid, felt that other workers were underpaid, that the working conditions were not what they should have been at Loomis Fargo, and he was going to seek to make a change.
As their shift neared its end, Johnson's truck returned to the Loomis Fargo warehouse, fully loaded with cash and checks. The driver began the routine check-in. A security guard inside the fenced complex identified the courier guard and his truck. The day's load was particularly heavy. It was the Easter holiday weekend, and consumers crowded the stores. During their shift, Johnson and his driver had collected millions from the busy retailers. Even more cash waited in the company's vault. Each shift, the guards faced the temptation of handling hundreds of times more money than they would ever earn in a lifetime.
My daughter's recital.
Terry, James Brown, and Dan Smith worked inside the warehouse as vault guards. They had worked together with Johnson for 2 years.
Get inside and I'll toss you the money.
But a bond had never developed between the three. The courier did not share in the camaraderie of his co-workers. He was an outsider that kept to himself. By 6:30 that evening, the driver was finished for the day. He clocked out and went home for the night. However, company regulations required Johnson to stay on. As courier guard, he had to wait while the day's load was booked in.
Here you go, guys.
He had to help store the money.
Another card.
These were the last moments that he would follow company procedure. Near 7 o'clock, when all the others had left, Johnson broke his routine of 10 years. He retrieved a bag from his car and sprang into action.
All right, that'll be good, man. Yeah. Good, man. Two, circle.
While the vault guards were busy, Johnson grabbed Smith's gun.
Turn your back. Hands up. Back against the
No,
wall.
what are you doing?
Shut up! Come on out here. Hands up.
No, what the hell are you
Shut up! Hands on the back of your head. Now!
doing? You gotta
Now! Brown, down.
When asked
Get the
what he was
shackles out of the
doing,
bag.
Johnson told his coworkers it wasn't a joke. Then he ordered them to put shackles and handcuffs on and to lie down next to each other.
Speed it up. Take that. Shackle. Lie on the floor. Lie on your belly. Lie on your belly.
He took one of the company's unmarked vans and backed it into the vault area.
You guys comfortable?
Shackled on the floor, Smith and Brown could do nothing but fear for their fate. The vault offered Johnson cash in all denominations. He left the coins and small bills of ones and fives.
Don't move, boys.
He just took tens or higher in unmarked, non-sequential bills. It was every crook's dream. With a half a ton of cash, the van took 2 hours to fill. But Johnson was in no hurry. He knew the next shift wasn't due till the morning.
All right, gentlemen, I want
At gunpoint, he moved the 2 bound guards into the back of the van.
stay covered up?
Then he began cleaning up the crime scene. He moved the cars belonging to Smith, Brown, and himself out of the employee parking lot so no one would suspect they were still in the warehouse. Johnson then grabbed what the police would look for first, his personnel file. He also took the videotapes from the surveillance cameras. Last, he set the vault timer so that the door would not open until the next afternoon, Easter Sunday. Everything had gone according to his well-thought-out plan. Then, Johnson got careless.
Johnson, what are you doing? Get your head down. What are you looking at? Get your head down!
With Smith and Brown as hostages, he drove the van the short distance to his home.
Hold up. All right. Go. Walk. Forward.
What you doing, man?
Just hold on. Just, all right. You see the closet right there?
Just
Right here.
this ain't necessary.
Put your hands on that pipe. Grab the pipe.
All right? What are you doing this for?
He handcuffed Brown to a closet pipe. He spoke about how unhappy he was in his job.
Johnson.
I'm not gonna hurt you. You'll be all right.
You just can't leave me like this.
Around midnight, Johnson returned to the van. He threw a blanket over the shackled Smith and threatened to kill him if he put up any struggle. Then, as they drove north, Johnson asked Smith why they hadn't been friends. He wanted to know why Smith hadn't ever asked him to go out for some pizza or for a beer. There wasn't much Smith could say.
He was a very quiet, withdrawn individual. He had been outspoken at times about his displeasure with Loomis Fargo, but yet he didn't really say what he wanted to do or where else he would go. I think he was just building up some frustration inside at that time over those years.
They drove all night, stopping only for gas. Sometime in the early morning, they stopped so Johnson could unload the money. Sitting in the van, covered by a blanket, Smith could discern little about their journey, except vague sounds, like the clank of a metal door being rolled up. While Johnson unloaded the money, Smith remained helpless in the van. He didn't know where they were, nor did he know what Johnson intended to do with him. A little more than an hour later, Johnson drove the van to some wooded acres in the Blue Ridge Mountains near Asheville, North Carolina. He forced the captive guard to handcuff himself to a tree and then lie down. Johnson then began to rant about his life.
10 years I worked for that company. Think about that. They didn't pay me my overtime.
Johnson left provisions and warm clothes. Before he drove off, he promised that in 2 days he would call the authorities and inform them of Smith's location.
Don't worry.
The next morning, employees arrived at Loomis Fargo, only to find that they were locked out of the warehouse. They called their supervisor. He arrived with the master set of keys. However, neither keys nor combination allowed them access to the vault. One glance at the monitor of the security camera inside the vault told them why.
Yes, this is supervisor for Loomis Fargo. We have a problem.
They had been robbed. Jacksonville police responded immediately to the call. But they had to wait hours for the technicians to open the vault. A quick tabulation of the missing money put the theft at over $10 million. The FBI immediately stepped in because of the amount involved and because much of it was federally insured money. The federal agents first inquired about missing Loomis personnel. All but Smith, Brown, and Johnson were accounted for. And Johnson's file was gone.
You're missing Johnson?
At the same time in North Carolina, Smith had freed himself. He used a Swiss Army knife to pick the lock on his handcuffs. Then he walked to a nearby road, where he was picked up by a forest ranger.
We were notified here in Jacksonville that Dan Smith had in fact freed himself on Sunday, and many of the pieces of the puzzle began to come together.
Smith led the authorities to Johnson's house. There they found Brown just where Johnson had left him 18 hours earlier.
I got him.
With the 2 Loomis guards safe, the FBI began the manhunt for Johnson. A description of Johnson and the missing van was sent out across the Southeast. The first lead came from an Army sergeant in Asheville, North Carolina, who spotted an abandoned white van. He reported the stolen vehicle with the broken driver's side window and keys in the ignition. Within minutes, 65 police officers and FBI agents descended into the area. But they were too late. Their suspect had bought a one-way ticket out of town. He was safely on his way to freedom.
$7 an hour, that's what Philip Johnson made. Driving a Wells Fargo truck, he hauled millions every day. But you can't be much of a player on $56 a day. $7 an hour.
Musician Al
that's what
Wells
Philip
immortalized the caper in song for WOKV.
This is Mike Miller on News Talk 690 WOKV. So the story is this. A security guard named Phil Johnson, who works for Loomis Fargo, instead of going home after his shift, leaves with nearly $20 million.
The improbable heist immediately seized the imagination of local broadcasters.
There were a lot of people in the audience who were really rooting for Philip Johnson on a lot of different levels. A lot of us could identify with him. I mean, how many people out there have worked in a job which they didn't think was ever going to take them any higher? How many people work in a job that they knew was never going to be any more lucrative? How many times do you work for somebody and realize that you know more than your boss knows and you can't understand why they don't go to you for advice? I think those were all the feelings that Philip Johnson had stored up in him. So when he did pull this off, he thumbed his nose at everybody. He said, I'm better than $7 an hour. I'm smarter than you think I am. And guess what? With all the smarts that all of our bosses have, I could do something that you said was fail-safe.
Philip Noel Johnson vanished, along with almost $20 million. More money than any individual in U.S. history.
We had no idea where Phil Johnson had gone. There was indications that he might be up in Canada. There were indications he could be in Mexico or that he could be down in Costa Rica or South America.
The only hope authorities had of finding Johnson lay in the jumble of evidence he had left in his home.
Ironically, it was the chaos that was left behind at his house that created the confusion for law enforcement. There was so much stuff there.
Investigators found Johnson's home to be one of a tormented but brilliant loner. They also discovered a paper trail that took them back 5 years earlier.
Mucho.
As far back as 1992, Johnson began preparing for his crime. Several former roommates told authorities Johnson was difficult to live with.
Stop leaving your crap around in my room.
Investigators discovered that Johnson stole his roommates' identities. He borrowed their driver's licenses and birth certificates to create a long list of aliases. The FBI began to canvass places where Johnson could have dropped off the money in the North Carolina area. Their stops included Mountain Home Mini Storage, a 100-unit storage warehouse 15 miles south of Asheville.
What we did was we put out communications through our network of FBI offices and resident agencies all along that corridor to go to all of the storage facilities within their territory, to show the pictures that we had of Phil Johnson, to describe what had happened, to see if there was anyone that had storage facilities in any of the aliases that we had and whether they could put an alias with a face, and in hopes of finding the money.
Nevertheless, no employees at the Mountain Home Mini Storage recognized pictures of Johnson. The investigators left the facility, even though they were within yards of the locker where Johnson had stopped the van and unloaded the money. For months, the trail grew cold. Authorities had little idea of where Johnson was. They worried that he had safely traveled to Brazil, where the United States had no extradition treaty. But their greater fear was about the money. The question on everybody's mind was, what did Johnson do with the $18.8 million? Some thought he might have buried the money, hoping to come back years in the future when fewer people were looking for him. The FBI worried that he might crate it and ship it out of the country. Others thought that Johnson was ornery enough to burn it all, just to spite Loomis Fargo.
And I think we all believed that if we found the perpetrator, we would find the money, and that the reverse might not necessarily have been true.
5 months later, Johnson made a fateful mistake. For reasons still unclear, he tried to sneak back into the U.S. from Mexico at the Gateway International Bridge in Brownsville, Texas. The American customs officials asked everyone off a northbound bus and began a routine inspection of the passengers. Customs Inspector Virginia Rodriguez walked right past a wanted poster for Johnson as she crossed to the bus, but she didn't recognize him. In the months since the heist, Johnson had lost weight, added a beard, and let his hair grow long. She asked him what he had been doing in Mexico for 2 weeks. He said he had been visiting friends. It was the way he said it that wasn't quite convincing to her. She asked for identification, and Johnson handed over a North Carolina driver's license. On a hunch, Rodriguez gave the license to a fellow customs agent to run through the National Crime Information Center database. Meanwhile, Rodriguez asked to inspect Johnson's bags. When she went through his luggage, she found $10,714 US. Rodriguez knew she was on to something.
Okay, we got a problem with him on ID check. We're gonna have to detain him.
Her fellow agent returned with the news that the name on the license, Roger D. Lauter, was an alias for Philip Johnson. The computer search came back with the flash alert: will extradite from anywhere in the world.
At that time, he was taken into custody, and the FBI office in Brownsville, Texas was notified that Mr. Johnson had been apprehended.
When we heard that he finally got caught down in Brownsville, Texas, by riding on a bus with fake identification and $10,000 on him, we just shook our heads in amazement and said, we thought this guy was a lot smarter than he turned out to be. It's because he was just an average guy. So when he finally got caught in such an average way, we really shouldn't have expected anything else.
Johnson was arrested and charged with armed robbery, kidnapping, and unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. If convicted on all counts, he faced a maximum sentence of life in prison and $1 million fine. Federal officials offered Johnson a deal in exchange for the missing money, but Johnson spurned any cooperation, thinking the money was safely hidden. He was wrong. When Johnson was arrested using the alias of Roger Lauter, FBI detectives discovered that a man using the same name had rented a room in Mexico City. A search of the boarding room yielded a yellow receipt from Mountain Home Mini Storage. At 2 in the morning on September 17th, 1997, FBI agents rolled up the door of the unit Johnson had rented. They found the missing Loomis Fargo money. Johnson left some personal items, including a book on depression and the videotape, If I'm So Wonderful, Why Am I Still Single? From the Brownsville arrest and the Mountain Home Storage Unit, the FBI recovered all but $100,000 of the millions that had been stolen. With the overwhelming evidence, there was little need for a trial. Johnson pled guilty to the charges of kidnapping, money laundering, and violation of interstate commerce under the Hobbs Act. He was sent to a maximum security federal prison, where he currently serves a 25-year sentence. The restitution he owes Loomis Fargo is $59,834.70. It will be paid back through prison labor, at a lot less than $7 an hour.